Welcome back, everyone. Let me tell you a story about arrogance, hypocrisy, and the most satisfying kind of poetic justice. Have you ever met someone who hides behind authority, the type who gets off on enforcing pointless rules just to feel powerful? Now imagine that same person finally choking on their own medicine. That is exactly what happened when I crossed paths with my fiancé's boss, a man so desperate for control, he didn't realize I was about to flip his entire little game against him. If you've ever dealt with someone who loves to flex their position, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and stick around. Because today's story isn't just about revenge. It's about integrity, respect, and standing your ground without ever raising your voice. It all started a few months ago at our engagement party. My fiancée is a lawyer, sharp, confident, and respected by everyone in her firm. I run a physical therapy clinic, small but successful, with a team I'm incredibly proud of. That night, as we mingled with her colleagues, I did what I always do when I meet people from her world. I offered them a professional courtesy. "If any of you ever need a physio," I told them, smiling, "just mention you know my fiancé's name, and I'll give you a nice discount." I meant it sincerely. I like helping people, and it's good business. What I didn't realize then was that this casual gesture would later become the spark for one of the most satisfying little revenges I've ever had the pleasure of serving. Over the following weeks, 4 of her colleagues actually became regulars at my clinic. They were great, hardworking, polite, and always grateful for the care. Then one day he showed up. Let's call him Graham. He was one of the firm's partners, the kind of man who thinks the world spins because he tells it to. I'd heard about him before. My fiancée and her co-workers couldn't stand the guy. He had that toxic mix of arrogance and insecurity that turns every interaction into a power struggle. The kind who interrupts you mid-sentence, laughs just a little too loud at his own jokes, and calls everyone buddy like it's a badge of superiority. So when Graham booked his first appointment, I braced myself. He walked into my clinic wearing a tailored suit like he was attending a board meeting. He gave the receptionist this patronizing smile, the kind that says I am going to make you earn your paycheck today. When he came into my office, he extended his hand with a firm shake and said, "Ah, so you're the famous fiancé. Let us see if you are as good at fixing backs as you are at throwing parties." He smirked, expecting me to laugh. I didn't. Instead, I gave him my warmest professional smile. "Let's get you feeling better," I said. The session went fine, at least physically. But emotionally, I could feel the tension. He talked at me, not to me, bragging about his cases, dropping hints about how much money he made, subtly condescending about my profession. Still, I stayed pleasant. That's part of the job. Treating the patient, not the personality. At the end of the session, when it was time to pay, Graham leaned in and said, "I believe there's a discount for employees of my fiancé's firm, right?" I smiled and said lightly, "Oh, that's for employees, yes." Then I gave him a small smirk. He paused, clearly realizing I'd just reminded him he wasn't exactly part of that little inner circle. From that day on, something shifted. He came back a few more times, and I could tell he was trying to assert dominance, like every visit was a test to see how much control he had over people around him. But in my clinic, titles mean nothing. Everyone gets treated with the same respect and the same boundaries. Fast forward about a month. One day, Graham came in again, and as I worked on his shoulder, we got to chatting. He asked how my day was going, and I told him honestly, "It's been busy. One of my therapists called in sick, so I've had to take on extra clients." He nodded, then said, "That must be annoying. Do they need to bring a doctor's note or something?" I chuckled. "Nah, I don't need that. If someone's sick, I want them to stay home and recover. Forcing them to come in for a certificate just spreads germs." He leaned back, smirking. "Well," he said, "that's where you and I differ. I'm actually thinking of being more strict about that in my office. Too many people abuse the system, you know. If you can't drag yourself to work, maybe you shouldn't be there." I remember feeling this chill of irritation crawl up my spine. It wasn't just the words. It was the smug way he said them, like compassion was weakness. I didn't argue. I just nodded politely and finished the session. But life, as they say, has a wicked sense of humor. A few days later, karma came knocking. I caught a nasty cold, probably from the same bug my therapist had. And like clockwork, I passed it to my fiancée. It hit her hard. By Friday, she was pale, coughing, barely able to stay upright. She worked from home that day, thinking it would pass. By Monday morning, she could hardly get out of bed. She called her boss, Graham, to say she'd need the day off. That's when he pounced. He emailed her back, formally, saying she'd need to provide a medical certificate. That's right. The same guy who, Dee just lectured me about being stricter, was now flexing that exact policy, for the first time ever, on my fiancée, who was literally bedridden because of an illness I caught taking care of my staff. It wasn't just about the rule. It was the intent. He wasn't following policy. He was reminding her who held the power. I could see how frustrated she was, sick, dizzy, and still having to deal with this man's ego. That's when I realized I had a chance to let karma do its job with just a nudge from me. You see, Graham had a 2 p.m. appointment with me that very same day. But at 1:30, I told my fiancée, "You need to see your doctor. You're not okay to drive." She agreed, barely able to walk straight from vertigo. So I booked her a same-day appointment at 2 p.m., right when Graham was supposed to be lying on my treatment table. Then I picked up my phone and sent him a message. "Hey Graham, sorry, I'll have to cancel your session today. My fiancee's unwell and I need to drive her to her doctor's appointment. I'll reach out if I can squeeze you in elsewhere, but right now I'm fully booked for the next 3 weeks." I could practically hear the indignation through his silence. 10 minutes later, my fiancee's phone buzzed. It was Graham. He messaged her saying, "No need for a medical certificate. You can just work from home." A few seconds later, my phone lit up with his name. "Hey, don't worry about today. No need to drive her. That's not necessary." I stared at the screen, grinning. This man, who just a few hours ago was demanding proof of illness, was now backpedaling so hard you could smell the burning rubber. I simply replied, "Sorry, she's already booked. Best she goes." And that was it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult him. I just let his own hypocrisy crush him under its weight. Later that week, my fiancée went back to work, certificate in hand. She told me Graham looked uncomfortable around her. Apparently, the other partners had overheard parts of the exchange and found it hilarious. The great Graham, suddenly desperate to undo the very rule he'd championed. Even better, my schedule stayed full. He tried to rebook a few times, but I was, truthfully, fully booked. And even if I hadn't been, I'd have made sure I was. Because some people you don't just heal. You teach them, quietly, gently, that they don't get to treat people like props in their power games. The beauty of it all? I didn't need revenge through anger or confrontation. All I had to do was act with decency and let karma play out in the open. And watching him scramble to reverse his own petty rule, that was better than any confrontation could have been. Looking back now, I realize something. When you deal with arrogant people like Graham, they feed off control. They thrive on making others bend, because it makes them feel important. But when you take that control away quietly, when you hold your ground without losing your composure, that's when you truly win. Because arrogance crumbles in the face of calm confidence. And the moment Graham realized he couldn't control me or my fiancée, that his rules had backfired, that was the moment he lost. If there's a lesson here, it's this. You don't always have to shout to make a point. Sometimes the loudest victory comes from silence, from living your values while someone else drowns in their hypocrisy. And honestly, that's the kind of revenge that sticks. Thanks for listening to this story. If you have ever dealt with a petty boss or someone who tried to assert power over you for no reason, tell me in the comments how you handled it. And hey, if you enjoyed this sweet dose of poetic justice, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because there's nothing more satisfying than watching arrogance collapse under its own weight. And trust me, there are plenty more stories just like this one coming soon. Until next time, stay kind, stay sharp, and remember, revenge doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes, it's as quiet as a cancelled appointment.